All right, here we are, water in, water out. This is another thing that kind of gets overlooked just a little bit with new tiny house people. So in the other ones, we've kind of gone over orientation, where that house is going to sit, where the north side is, south side is, where your best light is going to be, trees and stuff like that. The pad where you're going to park your tiny house, make sure it's dry, level is really important. And then we went to electricity to power your tiny house, because that's pretty important too. Now finally, water in and water out, they go together because it's a system. It constantly flows. And this is a little bit overlooked. And this is another reason that the property itself can be a little bit more expensive. Now there's really two ways that you can set up a tiny house. You can set it up, so let's just build it right here real quick. And then you're going to have water coming into it, and you're going to take a shower with it, you're going to wash your dishes with it, and you're going to wash your clothes with it, or whatever you're going to do. It's going to go down the drain from those areas and then come out. So where is it going to go when it comes out? That's a good question. How is it going to get in when it gets in? Also a good question. Typically, there's either a hose, so kind of the same setup. You're going to have the main house or main building, and there's going to be a hose that goes to the house, wherever it's going to get hooked up at. Or you can dig a well, in the ground. So that's a well underneath there, and then it goes into the house. So this is, water in is relatively straightforward depending on the property. There's a lot that goes into wells. There's a lot that goes into a hose, depending on where you live. In the winter months, we've got clients that have to disconnect their hose, and then they live off of water that's in a box, so some kind of a storage unit in there. So they fill up their water in here, and then they use that, and then that comes out. So this hose needs to be insulated. Again, like the electricity, this can get buried underneath the ground. You can do a supply pipe. In Minnesota, we got to be about 6 feet down, so it's got to go all the way underneath that frost line and then come back up, and then be insulated between where it's underneath the frost line all the way up to the house, kind of in those two areas. Same with a well. Your well is going to go down, and then anything that's exposed above the ground is going to have a house. You'll see a pump house or a well house on there that's insulated too, and then that's going to go into the house. So if you're going to do water in, pretty much you got a well or a hose or some other water transport. One gal was filling up 5-gallon buckets and then dumping them and just using from the 5-gallon bucket, which works great. There's no wrong way to do it, but thinking about this, the easiest way is to have constant water coming in. That's the best way. And then protecting that water coming in from freezing. Water out doesn't necessarily freeze because it's flowing continuously. So unless you have a trap or something that's like a P-trap, so your drain comes like this and comes out. So this trap is set up, this is not a very good drawing. This trap is set up to hold water in here. So this is going to hold a little bit of water, because you don't want sewer gases to come back up into the drain. So this trap, since it's standing water, can freeze if it's underneath your trailer. A lot of times showers, since they sit right on the floor, that trap gets trapped outside or kind of outside the warm wall. So you have to do some extra insulation on that, make sure that doesn't freeze, because if it does, that's bad. But once it leaves, this is flowing water, and it really doesn't freeze because it's just on its way out. You don't really have to worry about that as much. It's still good to put some kind of a heat tape on that. But once it's underneath the trailer, it's going to come out. Now, this is another situation. So when it's warm and it's nice outside, not a big deal. You can put some kind of a catchment tank, a gray water or black water tank underneath the trailer. And then you'll have to dump that out as you need to. So who knows how long, every couple weeks or something. You can get somebody to come in and pump that, like there's a pump service or a septic service that can come and pump this out just continuously. It's going to add a little bit of cost to it, like on a monthly fee or every other week or something like that. But this works, so you got water coming in, you're going to use it however you're going to use it, and it's going to go into this tank. Or you can hook up to the city services. So if this house has regular city services, in theory, you can run a line from that up to the tiny house area and then plumb into that, or you'll have to dig a septic system, which is kind of a couple parts. So if you come in from here, you're going to drain into it, and this is going to fill up, and then it's going to spill over this, and then it's going to leach out like this. So the solids get collected here over time. You'll have to pump this out. So when they say I've got to pump the septic system, it's because all the solids matters gets filled up in here, and then just the liquid comes out and then goes into the drain field. So that's kind of a couple of different ways there. Now, this can be expensive because you're digging in, anytime you bring in large equipment to dig up huge holes in the ground, that's going to be expensive. Along with running this drain line could be expensive. So it's just things to consider when you're building your tiny house and when you're trying to plan it to go to a property. That's why lot rents are a little bit more expensive too, because if they have this infrastructure in place, they're charging for that. We've had a client that put her own infrastructure in place, and it was, I think she's about like $12,000 worth of infrastructure, like as far as the power getting there and the water getting there. So it's an extra cost that she improved the property, and she doesn't get to take that with. So she owns her house, she has all that stuff, but the property itself, she had to put this drain line and water and electricity into it to get to the house. It's just something extra to consider about that. So water in, water out, even though the concept is pretty simple, what has to happen is a little bit tricky. Water in is fairly straightforward with just a hose or a well, but the water out can be a couple of different options. So if you have any questions about that or this entire process, just let me know, shoot me an email, and then we can get down to the bottom. If you have specific questions, we can try to help you out with that sort of stuff too. So this is kind of our wrap up, things to think about when you're going to go preparing your property for a tiny house. This is kind of the 5 quick, easy things to consider and things to start researching too. So ask your property owner, look for a property that has this stuff. Just be aware, get ready. It takes a long time to build a tiny house, and it's not something you should just jump into. There's a lot to consider. So I think that's it. This video is over. I hope you guys have a good day.